Okay, so I'll give you a bit of an introduction to what we're going to cover today first. I'm going to do a few introductions and ask people here today to introduce themselves in the chat as well. We'll give you a bit of a background about Natural Hazards Research Australia, which we refer to as the Centre, and the relationship between the Centre and the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning in bushfire science research. I'll be introducing Liam Fogarty from DELP to give some background about the project, and then we'll step through some of the project components and give you a chance to ask specific questions that you have about specific parts of the project. Give you just an overview of governance and reporting and run through some key parts of the expression of interest process, and that will bring us to the end. So to begin, our first speaker today will be John Bates, who's a Research Strategy Director at the Centre, and he has a governance role in the research program that this project will be part of. Liam Fogarty is the Program Director in Emergency Management at DELP. He's also the instigator of this project and will be DELP's research lead for this project. And so will be a key part of the relationship between the service providers and DELP in delivering this project. Loriana Bethune is the Program Manager for the DELP Bushfire Science Program at the Centre. She's just back from maternity leave. I was acting in that role till recently, which is why I'm stepping you through the briefing today. So John, I might pass to you now if you want to give some background around the Centre.
Thanks. Well, could you pop the presentation up for us, please? Just while Bly's do that, for those of you that haven't had anything to do with Natural Hazards Research Australia before, we are Australia's Research and Implementation Centre for Natural Hazard Resilience and Disaster Risk Reduction. We began operating on the 1st of July 2021, so we're coming up for our first birthday in a few months. The centre itself is funded by $85 million from the Commonwealth over a 10-year period, in addition to partner contributions that come through. The core objectives for our centre, and these are objectives that came to us with the funding from the Commonwealth, is protecting human life and minimising harm and suffering, contributing to developing and supporting well-prepared and resilient communities, and investing in research that translates into action. And that last point is hugely important for us as a centre, that the research that we invest in really needs to be research that is used by our end user partners to deliver outcomes and to drive change and to improve the outcomes. The next slide, please, Bly. So Natural Hazards Research Australia and its predecessors, the Bushfire Natural Hazards Cooperative Research Centre and the Bushfire Cooperative Research Centre, have been providing project support to. Let's ask everyone to mute themselves, please, if you haven't done that already. That would be very much appreciated. So, as I was saying, that there's been an ongoing relationship between the Research Centre and the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning that goes back to 2011. And through that, what we do is we undertake research on behalf of DELP. So we go through a range of activities to manage it for them. Within that, and you can see the diagram on screen at the moment, the program is overseen by the states represented in the department, is managed through a project control board, and the contracting and day-to-day management of the contracts are managed through Natural Hazards Research Australia. For all the projects, there is a policy lead within DELP, and DELP as a stakeholder is actively involved to make sure that what's being delivered by the projects is indeed what is important for the department. So the governance comes through the project control board. Within the centre, there is a project manager, and that will be Loriana Bethune as we move forward, and there will be a DELP research lead, and Liam Fogarty will talk through that as he goes through his presentation today. So on that, Blythe, I might hand back to you. We can have a look straight into the project.
Great, thank you. So Liam is going to run through some of the project context for him, and while he's getting set up, I'll just stop sharing so you can get set up there, Liam. I'll just let you know, so he'll be presenting some information for about 10 to 15 minutes. If you have questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. Otherwise, we'll hold questions until Liam's finished presenting, and then we'll have a question and answer opportunity at the end.
Thanks very much, Blythe, and thanks for everybody who's at least thinking about expressing interest in this important project. I'll attempt to get my screen up and running, and that looks like it's happened. So the project we're talking about today, Technologies for Safer and More Productive Firefighting, I just want to run through a bit of the background and rationale as to why this is an important project, help focus on some of the key points that I think are important from the outset, but also on the project process and governance to some extent, and how we want to work with a partner to unpack that by bringing a mix of field operational personnel with technology developers together to actually come up with solutions to what is, I think, a very well-known problem in Victoria, and I suspect an increasing problem over much of southeastern Australia following our 2019-20 Black Summer fires. So you've all received the briefing materials, and so what we really want to do is be able to identify and assess tools for more productive and safe firefighting in a rapidly changing environment. And again, I'll just pick on the three key aspects there: safety, productivity, and effectiveness. And I'll unpack those a little bit in the operating environment through some of the next slides. Some of the background, the problem, if you like. We all know the narrative to some extent. We can't ignore it. It's been on our news either around bushfires or floods or whatever over the last 4 or 5 years. What's really the big one for us in this broader context is the repeated severe fire and climate change is changing our forest structures, making them more flammable and hazardous to work in. And that's a real challenge and a real problem for us. Bushfires are becoming more frequent and severe as a result of these drivers and these changes. And for us, that includes the occurrence and incidence of lightning, or at least the receptivity of the environment to lightning storms. And they're becoming more difficult and unsafe to control. That's creating problems for us in how we go about our business and our technologies that we use, and I'll touch on some of those as we go through the presentation. Really the same technologies that we've had in place since the 40s, 50s and 60s. They're becoming more powerful, but it doesn't fundamentally change what they do or how we work in the environment that we're working in. So I just want to give a little picture of the sort of things I'm talking about. A lightning storm on the Black Range in 2013, I think, just to give you an idea of how these things start and the sorts of fires that we face and need to deal with. Now, this one's next to a road. That isn't always the case, but this is just a typical thing that we may find. I guess the environment looks a little bit more like this for us. Here's some remote fires that started in 2019, just before the new year, in the Ovens Valley, and just looking at near Mount Buffalo. Just lock this area in your mind, because I'm just using it a little bit for illustrative purposes and trying to pick up some of the common themes, but also based on an area in the state. So just so you can get a feel for the environment that we work in and the challenges we face. As I said, that earlier picture, we were lucky we don't always get lightning strikes next to roads. We love it when we do, but more often than not, we're dispatching people into very remote, rugged, steep terrain. And when you look at that from an aerial view, there are large parts of the state, being the dark green, where it's much greater than 60 minutes in driving time and several hours once you sort of embark on foot to get people in there and so on. Very remote country. Talked a little bit about in terms of the problem scoping, the fact that we're getting repeated severe fires and that we're impacting on forest structures. This is a sassafras gap in 2020, and this is a fire burning through young regrowth ash, and this has a really great chance that this will be changing the forest structures. But also, you'll see there from the previous fire in 2006, all of those dead standing trees, we call them stags or hazard trees. Their habitat trees are under different circumstances, but under these circumstances, they're a problem, if you like. And that's a little bit more what I want to talk about and touch on. For those that manage these forests and also were involved in me in some recent reseeding projects after these fires, this is a heartbreaking picture, the view that we're looking at. This is what it looks like on the ground at the end of all of that, where we have these structures with heavily impacted forest canopies, an increased level of forest canopy die-off as a result of repeated fires and often heavy regrowth understory underneath it. So when you think about putting people on a day of 38 degrees, 20 kilometre, 30 kilometre hour winds and so on, and having to fight fires in these environments, it's a really challenging environment. This is a similar sort of area that we're looking at those fires up around Mount Buffalo early on, and that's a 1 to 250,000 scale. And for those that know Victoria, you know, you're driving from Bright to Falls Creek in that sort of area there, Bogong. It's big country, it's steep country, and all of those orange, yellow / orange and red areas are areas where we have elevated tree hazards. So that view that I just put in front of your eyes there a while back in terms of dead standing trees, shrubby understory, when we put fires out in the landscape, that's the proportion of our landscape that we're dealing with these sorts of hazards and risks. This is what it looks like on the ground a little bit closer up when things go wrong. Thankfully, nobody was injured in this particular instance. But once trees become undermined by fire, again in strong wind conditions and so on, this is the sort of thing can happen. This was a relatively small branch, but I suspect we've got a few engineers online. And you also know that once something becomes undermined and comes off a stump like that, you have all these lever forces as well as the weight of the tree and the timber involved. So it's an incredibly over a small area, happens very quickly and has a lot of power wrapped up in it, a lot of energy. For us, again, though, this is more real in that since 2009, we have lost a number of firefighters in the state of Victoria as a result of falling trees. Some of them been visiting us from out of state, the ACT in particular, where there've been impact, and we've also had people who've suffered serious long-term impairment as a result of these sorts of damages and working in these environments. So the solutions, we're looking at a range of issues and solutions about how we can better deal with remote firefighting, more rapid initial attack and safer operating arrangements in our forests, and covering a range of options. But this one really sits into the develop and procure more and better resources. And I'll talk a little bit more around what I mean by that. To do that, I'm going to give a little bit of initial attack 101, if you like, because when you look at those fires, those couple of small fires in that earlier scene that we were looking at, after prevention fails, after our ability to stop people, say campers or whatever, lighting fires, and we do a lot of work in that area, fails, our next point of intervention is initial attack, getting into fires early and putting fires out rapidly. When we've got lightning, prevention isn't in the toolkit. We can't alter a lightning storm. All we can do is respond to lightning storms, and that's a lot of what we have to do. Another video, so just to give you an idea of why this is important. So this is just a video run of that same sort of area, a little bit further to the west, but an earlier lightning storm that went through there in 2019, and you can see some areas on the ground where fires have started. And we put a lot of these out, but this is what the landscape looks like 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days after that, or even on a single day after we get a severe fire weather stream come in and so on. So we often only get one chance at these things. In talking about initial attack, I wanted to touch briefly on fire intensity very quickly for people. And I'm not sure if we've got Andrew Sullivan and co online, but we're using some of their images in this picture here. We have a really limited range at which we can work when we're controlling fires, and it's at the bottom end of the fire behaviour spectrum. So you look at potential worst case fire behaviour under different fire danger conditions. We can only work at that very bottom end of the range when fires are relatively cool, not emitting so much energy. This is an energy scale on this side, kilowatts per metre. And we're stuck down this end, and we're most likely to get those conditions the hours and the days after a lightning storm goes through. We're most likely to move up into these sorts of conditions in the week or 2 weeks of a dry summer after those events. So we really need to lock in at that point. The other point is there, and I've got there, that the current limit of direct head fire attack is way down the bottom end of that: aircraft, machines, people on the ground, water. These technologies we've been using, as I said, since for over 40 to 50 years. They've become more powerful, but they haven't fundamentally changed. A little bit of fire behaviour 101. Again, fires, once they start, they go through an acceleration and growth phase, and they become more efficient at burning area. And this is just a simple sort of model of what happens with time for just an example fire that I've run up a model on. So you can see there that over time, under certain condition, your perimeter length increases, but also what also happens is that fires become more efficient at burning area at the same time. I don't want to touch on area too much. Focus on perimeter length more so, because when we have to put fires out, fundamentally what we have to do is be able to get on the ground and be able to contain a fire much more quickly than it's growing, and hold that fire. So that's the fundamental requirement we need to achieve that initial attack. Depends a lot on the productivity of the resources that you put on the ground. And here's again just some examples of 3 different scenarios: heavy, moderate or light, or you might call it low productivity, moderate productivity, and high productivity response, more so. And it just shows the sorts of things that might happen if you put the wrong resources on the ground in the wrong environment. So here, with a heavy response, able to construct fire line and contain fire more quickly than it's growing, and we maybe burn 150 hectares and have to wrap up about 4 kilometres. This is under relatively severe fire danger conditions, but just to give people an example, probably right on the limit of what we could hold. If we're not quite up to the mark, then we can hold that fire, but we've always got fire in the landscape. We've got a risk that fire will escape. And if we're too light, if we've got the wrong tools in the wrong environment, or not enough of them, we don't get near it. And again, the idea is just to be able to get around a spreading fire, looking at it from the ground more quickly than it's actually growing, and pinch it off, hold it in. The other point then is also timing of response. So if we're slow in our response, if we're dilly-dallying or we're short of resources, the longer it takes, the harder it gets. And just some same resource, that heavy response in that, or high productivity response in that first example, if we get that out relatively early, we've got a chance of pinching it off at that 150 hectares. If we're late, we're looking at 520 hectares, but likewise, if we're at a point where we're too late, then we don't catch it. It's still going. Models I've used are sort of, based on fire spread and fire ellipses. The environment we work in is much more complicated than that and complex than that, and shown you some examples of that. But the basics still apply, and the basics that we need to bring into this project as some of our founding principles and work from there is that fire behaviour is a limiting factor in a lot of ways, but rapid response increases our chance that the rate of response and the weight of response are really quickly, and the appropriateness of response are really important as well. I did want to talk about aircraft, in part because whatever solutions we come up with may be an adjunct, may support aerial response, but I want to make it really clear that we have to put people on the ground to fight fires in this environment at the moment. That's the only way we can guarantee success, and that aircraft are complementary to that, but they don't replace that. So in terms of solutions about what we're doing here, unless you can add a molecule to water to make it sort of run back uphill and be heat seek fire, be non-toxic to the environment or to humans, then this isn't an aircraft project. But I will just explain a little bit more around the rationale behind that. Aircraft that play a really important role in what we do. It's a whole host of things that influence their effectiveness, and I don't want to run through all of this, but really it's a very complex arrangement. By and large, though, the key point is that aircraft help us slow fire, help us hold fire in certain parts, but they don't extinguish fire. And some recent research from the US assessing several thousand aerial drops really highlights they don't extinguish fire. They simply they slow it, they help hold it, but yet we still have to get around it. We still have to deal with it. And this is that same example early on where I've just assumed, for example, that aircraft, by bombing it using water bombing apparatus, what you can do is, instead of say having to deal with a perimeter of about 1,800 meters, if you can slow it down, you may be dealing with about 1,200 meters at a point in time, or 12,000, sorry, 1.2 kilometers. It's a retarding, it's a slowing, it provides tactical advantage. Then if we add that, our response to that, it just shows how we can be more effective. We work together, people on the ground, crews on the ground, machines, all those sorts of things, combined with aircraft, and we bring about a better net outcome, less 100 hectares in the first scenario of a 60-minute response, and say less 420 hectares in that second scenario. If we don't get initial attack right, if we don't achieve initial attack, and it's not always possible, all of those factors come into play that I was talking about before. We're always dealing with resource constraints. We can always move more rapidly from relatively cool weather following the passage of a front to more rapid elevated fire dangers. This is what the outlooks look like. So just to highlight the critical point that initial attack and being able to get the right resources on the ground makes to us, that's all. So a quick little summary there. Aircraft provide largely reduced fire behaviour and provide tactical advantage. They don't put fires out alone. Ground crews are needed to reduce fires, and in our environment under drought and forested conditions, this is really critical for us. And just some photos of some resources working on the ground. A little bit of a summary slide. Video, just hoping the noise works for this.
Currently we have a 13-hectare fire going, a fire up on Little Bulla Spur, up on Mount Bulla. At the moment we've had a little bit of rain impacting the fire ground, so it's just slowed things down. Deployment yesterday was good. We had about 48 firefighters on the fire ground towards the mid to late afternoon, and they had a great impact on the fire by putting edge around and also cutting in a helipad on the one of the spurs so we could get the crews in there, because clearly there's no vehicle access. Last night we had aerial bombing activities from 10 o'clock through to 2:30. Put out over 100 loads of water onto the fire, onto the northwest side, which slowed things down considerably. We have a mix of ground crews and air support. The air support comes in the form of aircraft laying retardant a little bit further from the fire's edge. We have water bombers that put water on the fire edge and sometimes inside, but it can't be done without the aid of our hand crews, putting in mineral earth brakes, breaking up the fire, blacking it out and extinguishing all the hot spots that are in the fire. So a really good combination. They work very well together.
Just unmute myself again. So again, I hope you just notice the closer we get to the ground, just the the steepness of the terrain. There wasn't a lot of fire shown in that actual image. More often than not, when our people are on the ground, they are actually fighting directly, raking fuels away from burning fire. But hopefully you picked up the incredibly steep nature of the environment we worked in, and the dirty, gnarly work that we need to do to actually contain fires in the landscape using direct firefighting methods at that early phase of fire growth. So I just wanted to now then move to the project a little bit about what we're looking for. The key points, our forests are changing. They are becoming increasingly hazardous over wider areas. We've always had these sorts of problems. We've always had hazardous trees. We're just having to deal with it more frequently and in nearly every circumstances. We've always had a culture of looking up as much as you do look down and around, and that's just what working in a forest is all about. But at some point in time, this is starting to influence strategies and tactics and the effectiveness of our first control. I'd hazard a guess that while we are having to deal with this problem most, that 2020 probably signals a bit of a change, and that these problems will become more widely experienced throughout Australia. And I know particularly certain parts of southwest Tasmania that are equally a problem. Our aim is to trial new technologies. I don't want to pin down what that is. I think the important part is that scoping process that we're talking about, that partnership with key practitioners to really unpack what the solution space is, but understanding it is very much around that focus on enabling us to work in these environments more safely, more efficiently, and more effectively. The really critical parts of it. Project funding, $1.4 million. So there's the $900,000 to set up the core research team, and then there's an operating fund there, if you like, to whatever we agree on, to develop, to adapt, to trial as a first phase of looking at how we might deal with this problem. We've also got some separate funds available in the form of a 0.5 FTE for the duration of the project that we haven't quite locked this in yet, and Alan Slipovich couldn't be here today. He's enjoying the beaches in Manly. But to set up potentially a partnership approach, because they've also got a next generation tanker project that they're getting off the ground. So if that works, that may provide some great synergies and opportunities for our partners as well. The governance, I won't talk on that. Blythe's already covered off on that. And what we're after, I don't want to run through that. You've all seen the EOI, but for me, it's very much around the right mix of people who have innovation, technology backgrounds, but also can link with us in a practical and pragmatic way to look at some potential new solutions for a pretty major problem. And you look at the view shed there, they're the key things in my mind, the environment and the communities we're trying to manage, but also the safety of our firefighters. And you might note how young they all are, and they're a really important part of our team, and we need to look at ways to better support our operations in these environments. So that's it from me, Blythe. So back over to you. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Liam. All right, I'll let people have a little bit of a think about questions they might want to pose to Liam. And while you're doing that, I'm going to invite Joel Reid from CFA, he's an engineer at CFA, to say a few comments about sort of this problem space and the needs out of this type of project. Thanks, Joel.
Thank you. Look, I appreciate this opportunity. So my interest in, I guess, wheelhouse is in vehicle design, not so much the vehicle that's behind me, that's an urban pumper, but in a rural landscape and a tanker type scenario, some obvious kind of big criteria that we all want a vehicle that is efficient, from a pump capacity, water volume capacity, and what water delivering systems we have, nozzles and branches. So that's something we always evolve and move forward with. But it's alarmingly more important that we need to look after our members and all firefighters on the ground. So when you factor in the risks of trees, burn over, but also in our traditional tanker arrangement, we have, firefighters that's standing on the deck, exposed to the different elements around restrained. So, there could be some scope within this project to start to rethink about how we do a vehicle design. And I can see some amazing opportunities from this project to really, alter that traditional thinking. I'm not wanting to go too far in the details, but, a lot of these technologies are now, not, NASA type kind of technologies. They are commercially available, and there's certainly kind of sub projects that could really flush out how efficient these little new technologies could be that we could fit to a future tanker. For example, all firefighting could be done within the cabin, and the cabin could be a bit of a safe house, safe environment from a burnover and falling object perspective. So, working on ways to flush that out. So, we're mindful that our landscape, we're from a CFA volunteer perspective, numbers can be quite challenging at times. So, if we can come up with an efficient vehicle with reduced crew and a safer platform, fantastic. So, it's just having this opportunity to have some funding and some dedicated thinking around, outside the box. I'm sure that something could easily be achieved, as I said, in today's technology where things aren't NASA based, they're kind of commercially available. So really looking forward to the outcomes. Thank you.
Thanks, Joel. I thought we might give people a chance to ask any points of clarification from Liam about the problem and what this project is designed to achieve. I haven't had any questions on that come through the chat. If anybody would like to ask a question to Liam on the project itself and what it's trying to achieve, you can raise your hand under the reactions button and we'll have a look. I'll just give you a couple of moments to have a think about that. And if not, I'll step us through some different components of the project and give you a chance to ask more specific questions. You must have given a great presentation, Liam, that covered off on everything people needed to know.
Either I've bamboozled them or it's been brilliant. You never quite know on sort of Teams meetings or Zoom meetings. That's fine.
That's fine. You set them quite a challenge. Yep, Marta, comment there from Marta that it was a great presentation. I think it's a really exciting space for a technology development project to be looking into. I'm going to just share my screen and I'm going to get a bit more into the more boring, detailed parts of information that you might be interested in now. While I'm doing that, I also should just reiterate, we expect that proposals for this project will come from a consortium, we think it's unlikely that there'll be one organisation that can cover sort of all the different angles of a project like this. So with that in mind, if you are happy for others who are here and potentially interested in the project to contact you, please pop your name and a little bit, perhaps a sentence about who you are and your contact details in the chat, and I'll circulate that afterwards. It might be a good way for groups who might be interested but potentially not able to do all the components of the project to potentially join forces and put in a proposal together. So keep that in mind. All right. Okay, so the budgeting around this project is a little bit different to normal. I thought people might wish to ask some points of clarification about the budget. The $900,000 is there for the whole project, which was broken into two phases, phase 1 and 2. That budget is for both phases. However, it doesn't cover the actual development of the technology that would be trialed in phase 2. It's more the management of trials in phase 2. And then the additional budget of the $500,000 is there to be allocated depending on which technology options are taken to trial to support procurement and hiring and development of the new technology that's put through in the trialling. So I just wondered if anybody had any other questions that they wanted to ask about budget or timeframe. All right, that's great. I'll let you know as well that if you are welcome to email questions to us, and I'll show you the email address. Any questions we get and answers we give will be put up on the project website, and I'll give you the link to that as well, so that everybody's got access to them. All right, the first phase of the project is really the scoping phase. So I've just put up the key steps of that phase and the expected outputs. So let people have a think about if you've got questions or to clarify around what's expected in that first phase. So that's sort of everything up to get ready for selecting the technologies for trial and designing, developing technology to take to trial. So I'll leave that there. And I do have one question from Sheila. So clarifying if we can ask for indirect research costs. So that's admin costs, etc., or just direct costs. So that's indirect research costs from university. John, if you're still here, I might throw you to that because NHRA has a position on indirect costs.
Thanks, Blythe and Sheila. Yes, we do. I mean, the many and most of the projects that we have, we look to the universities covering those costs as an in-kind contribution to the project. And if you look at the assessment criteria and the evaluation criteria, there is a value for money piece in there. So, I mean, these projects are not there just to provide indirect costs that support other parts of the university and infrastructure. So where the costs are directly and can directly be applied to the project, then they are reasonable costs to consider. Just understanding that in other submissions that are made, you know, they will also have in-kind contributions to that. So I think, you know, we're always, in every research project, we're all looking at what's the best leverage we can get from the money we have and what the other partners provide. So the short answer is you could do that, but it's certainly not something that we would encourage. And if it was a project that we were running out of our centre, that would not be something that you could be asking for.
Thanks, John. And I've got a question for you, Liam. I think more so for you. Do applicants need to have industry partners in the consortium?
I guess it depends. I mean, in a lot of ways, ourselves and CFA are looking to come in this as industry partners to some extent because we've got the problem. But likewise, there are other industry partners out there who may bring skills and knowledge either in sort of fire sciences, productivity monitoring, all of those sorts of things that may benefit the project consortium. I wouldn't see it as being an essential requirement, but I do think, obviously, as we sit down and evaluate any EOIs, then the strength of that EOI is increased if you've thought about what some other requirements are that you might need to bring to the table. John's put up his hand there.
Yep. Did you want to add to that, John?
I just wanted to add to that. You know, we have other projects that I've been looking at and exploring where industry partners come on board and offer access to equipment that they have. So I think, you know, in putting a bid together, having an industry partner, if that industry partner is willing to provide access to equipment or to provide discounted access to equipment, that's something you could certainly consider.
And particularly when it comes, I'll just add one more point there. Particularly, you know, if you look at the process we're trying to do here, it's very, very loose, tight, moderately tight, if you like. It's very much around let's frame the problem in the first instance. Let's look at what the options are. So it may be challenging to preempt like if you're talking about specific equipment or whatever, maybe challenging to fully preempt what that solution may be. I've got some ideas in my head, but I don't want to. I think we need to open that up in the first instance, and that's in part why that operating fund's there, so we can, as a collaborative, go out and if we think we need to bring something into the mix to do that, and as John says, what we do find then is once people see these opportunities, then they become increasingly interested in becoming involved, because who knows where this may end up. As I say, this isn't just a problem Victoria faces. So one, there's sort of research and development kudos in this sort of space, but two, there's potentially quite a large future SME development opportunity.
Thanks. Got another question from Mohammed from University of Sunshine Coast, just clarifying a couple of points of scope and whether things fall within scope of what might be considered through this project. So the first one is harvesting salvage trees.
No, the scope of this project is very much around, in particular, and I'm just that ability to undertake rapid initial attack in remote forested, in highly hazardous remote forested environments. So a lot of that stuff might be good, but it's not what we need to do here.
And there was another item about planning better forest road and trails for quicker site access. Would that be in scope?
No.
Nice short answer. And the final, I think, is probably in scope, testing remote controlled harvesting equipment, or maybe not harvesting. Yes. Yeah,
well, remotely controlled harvesting equipment that can be adapted to constructing fire trails, putting water on fires, splitting open, identifying and splitting open burn hot spots, falling hazardous trees, so we can make an area safe to move people in on the ground. All of that's in scope.
Great. I will share my screen again in a moment. I hope I haven't missed any questions. Let me double check. No, I have not. Good. And just move on to a couple of other project components to see if they raise other questions. So phase 2 is the trial component. Was there anything else you wanted to say, Liam, about what expectations are of the trial part? Because I know that's something that will be developed sort of at the end of phase 1 a little bit more, but is there anything around expectations of the small scale and field testing that applicants would need to know?
No, I haven't really given that as much thought as it's still a little bit of a black box, because I think we need to go through these other phases, other than to say that we do conduct operations, and particularly planned burning operations and so on. So we do have an ability to, even though not under exactly the same conditions, to actually provide a safer, more controlled operating environment to try these things in a real fire environment as well. So again, as an agency, we can bring some potential support and weight to bear to not only do concept designs, but actually put stuff on the ground and trial it in a forested environment with fire involved, with smoke involved, all of those things.
That's good, thanks. And I guess something else to make sure is highlighted is right through the project, there's an expectation of quite a high degree of collaboration. So there'll be a project reference group, an expectation of collaborating quite closely with people from DELT, Forest Fire, Management Vic, CFA. Governance and reporting. So we've covered pretty much the major aspects of governance. Just to make sure you're aware that for contracting purposes, the contract would be between the centre, so Natural Hazards Research Australia, and a provider. Given that we're expecting consortium proposals, we prefer to have one lead provider, or will require really one lead provider for contracting purposes. So if you have any questions about that, you can pass them through to us via email. Reporting is to the centre as well. There's expectations that when major milestones are delivered, that they are reported into a project management system. We'll have a process set up for quarterly progress reporting. There's a project evaluation that's done at the end, which would be in consultation with Liam and that reference group, and an expectation of periodic presentations to get stakeholder input at crucial decision points within the project. So the EOI process itself, as I said, information is available on that project webpage on our website. So the link is there, and we will put questions and answers up on that page, as well as a copy of this briefing so that you can refer back. The best contact, if you have any questions through the EOI process, is via email to research@naturalhazards.com.au. That's an actively monitored email, so we'll get back to you quickly at that address. And that the EOIs, just to reiterate, are due at midnight on Tuesday on the 17th of May. So the expectations of the submission are listed in the document, the EOI documents. I won't go through them. I'll let people have a chance to perhaps put any questions about what's required in a submission into chat. Just wanted to bring your attention to the final dot point there, that we do have a draft contract that if you are putting in a proposal, please request a copy of that. We expect that to be reviewed as a part of the EOI process. And then the evaluation process, just to let you know what will happen once submissions come in. We have an assessment panel put together at the centre that will assess proposals against the criteria listed in the document. And then that will be Liam, as research lead, will be involved in that assessment process. And then we'll make a recommendation to the state's representative for the Bushfire Science Research Program at DELP, which is Dylan Rowe. And then you'll be notified afterwards. So if you have any questions about responding those, so application submissions should be address each of those points strongly in the 8 pages of the submission. That was it from us. I'll stop sharing. So that's the same link there. Just to reiterate, the questions and answers will be included up on that page. We'll get slides out to you as well. I don't think I have any more questions coming through chat. No. Okay, so I guess now just a chance for anyone to make any final comments or questions. So is anyone attending who has not yet spoken like an opportunity to say something or to ask a question of Liam or John?
I just had a question, please, about the consortium that you were talking, that you expect that the research proposal should come from such a group. What's the best way that we could shape such a consortium, and what's your recommendation? Who are the main players, and how we as a researchers, especially from university, can get into those consortium? Thank you.
Did you want to say anything on that, Liam?
Look, I think it's a little bit about using, as Blythe's asked people to do, to put their names down, to use the networks that this session hopefully builds, to share some ideas with some other potential providers who've expressed interest. Blythe, it's probably best if people have a specific idea or a proposal or part thereof to come back to you, and we may have to help make a few of those linkages. But I think once you do that, in terms of it being an open EOI, we probably just need to give people an idea of at least what the intent of that is and so on to keep it open and honest. But I'll let you talk about the EOI process. But I'm happy to engage in a conversation if people do want to have a follow-up conversation. But again, we just need to be clear that if we do that, we may not identify the who, but if there are any specific questions that people raise or whatever, then we're obliged to make sure that everybody has access to that, just to make sure it's fair and open. But don't be discouraged by that. This is I think, as you know, I see it as a complex and challenging problem, but it's also an exciting start of hopefully thinking a little bit differently about how we deal with one of the most fundamental, high risks but important interventions we have in our bushfire management armoury.
Thank you, John. I think you wanted to add something to that.
Yeah, because as part of the EOI process, we can't recommend people. We can't recommend partners that you can perhaps have. One of the opportunities we do have, if people are interested and you don't manage to put your contact details into the chat, if you do want to let people know that you're available and interested in being part of a consortium, we can share that as part of the Q&A. But I think in terms of your response to this itself, we will not make suggestions on what type of partner you should have, or indeed provide any names for a partner that you should have. This is something that, as someone responding to the EOI, is your responsibility, and we won't go there because that gets into the independence and probity of the assessment we'll do of the EOIs.
Thank you. And Sam, I think you had a question.
Yes, hey everyone, thanks for the presentation and information. So I'm from the University of the Sunshine Coast as well. Just a question, I think perhaps for Liam. When you look at the scope of the project, how would you sort of rate the trade-off between technology development and effectiveness versus the risks and safety of the operator? Where is the balance kind of there for you guys?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question, Sam. At this point in time, I think the risks and safety are critical. And look, in terms of a solution, there may be no operator on site. That may be where we get to here. And but you know, so you know, when I think about it, the productivity, effectiveness, and safety, whatever the solution is, it has to enable us to be able to do what we need to do more safely, and that's the bottom line. But there may be other ways to go around it, and I haven't tried to unpack that too much because I wanted to set the problem and not start to buy the solution. And somebody mentioned roboticizing harvesting machinery, maybe better ways to identify hazardous trees and so on more quickly and deal with them more quickly and all of those sorts of things. So there's a lot of scope there, but the problem is that we have to put people on the ground to fight fires in these deep, remote, highly hazardous environments, in particular where falling trees are a problem and increasingly a problem.
All right, thank you, Liam.
Thank you. All right, I don't think we have any additional questions. So thank you everybody for your time today and for your questions. I will share contact details with everybody who's put them into the chat. I'll email them around so you can have each other's details and follow up. I hope you've been a little bit inspired by the challenge that Liam has put to you. I think it's an exciting and new area and a really great opportunity to kind of blaze ahead. So thank you. Liam, did you want to have a chance for have the final word?
Oh, look, I think we've covered all the points, but again, yeah, just thanks for everybody who's attended. I really hope we encourage people to become involved. I realise it is a big problem we're throwing out there, or a big challenge we're throwing out there. We're a willing partner in this. It is, you know, the safety of our people and our ability to deal with bushfires is a really important. It goes to it has to go to the core of and the grain of the organisation that we are. So we're very keen to partner up with a group or consortium to help us better look at different and better ways to do with this. So thanks, Blythe.
Thanks, Liam. I think that's a good place to end. Thank you very much, everyone. As I said, I'll be in touch with contact details, and we hope to see some great proposals come through before the 17th of May. Thanks for your time today. Goodbye.